Beverly Hills, California. Would you risk everything to save someone who wouldn't even look at you? Malik Johnson never had a childhood. At 7 years old, survival was all he knew. No bedtime stories, no warm embraces, just the cold pavement of Beverly Hills and the hunger that never truly went away. Every night, he watched from the shadows as luxury cars pulled into massive estates, their headlights flashing against golden gates. He saw families gathered around warm dinners through enormous windows, living lives he could only imagine. Some nights, he wondered what it felt like to have a bed, a warm meal, a safe place to sleep. But wondering never changed anything. The only thing that mattered was surviving another day. One of those mansions belonged to Victor Langston, a billionaire real estate tycoon. His daughter, Emily, had everything Malik didn't: money, privilege, and a world that told her she was better than kids like him. They had crossed paths before, though she had never really seen him. He was just another homeless kid in the background, invisible and insignificant. Sometimes he'd see her riding in the back of a sleek black car, scrolling through her phone without a care in the world. Other times, he caught glimpses of her at school when he passed by the gates of her prestigious academy. Her world was polished and perfect, untouched by hardship. Malik had learned long ago not to envy kids like her. There was no point. Wishing for something you couldn't have was a waste of time. But when disaster struck, their worlds collided in a way no one expected. It started with the smell, thick smoke curling into the night air, the sound of sirens in the distance growing louder by the second. Malik turned his head and saw the flames licking the sky, casting an eerie glow over the quiet streets. His stomach twisted. He had seen fires before, but never this close, never this big. And then he heard the screaming. Because in the face of fire, status and wealth meant nothing, and Malik was the only one who could save her. If you were in Malik's position, would you have gone into that fire? Why or why not? That night, the Langston family hosted a grand gala. Wealthy guests filled the lavish estate, their laughter and clinking glasses echoing through the halls. The chandeliers sparkled, the music swelled, and the night seemed perfect. Emily, however, wanted nothing to do with any of it. Bored and restless, she sneaked away from the party, slipping upstairs to her bedroom. She didn't care about the gowns, the suits, or the endless small talk. All she wanted was to be alone. That's when the fire started. No one knew how it began. A candle left burning? An electrical spark? It didn't matter. Thick smoke filled the hallways. The fire alarms blared, drowning out the music below. The guests panicked. Staff members ran. People rushed toward the exits, pushing past each other in their desperate need to escape. But in all the chaos, no one realized Emily was still inside. Outside, Malik was digging through a dumpster, searching for scraps of food. The scent of rich leftovers was strong, and his stomach ached with hunger. But then, something else caught his attention. Smoke, flames, chaos. His eyes darted to the massive mansion, its upper floors now engulfed in fire. The glowing inferno reflected off the expensive cars parked in the driveway, turning the luxurious estate into a nightmare. Then he heard it, a scream from the second floor. His heart pounded. She's still in there. The smoke thickened, curling into the night air like a living creature. The mansion, once a symbol of untouchable wealth, was crumbling under the weight of the flames. The fire spread rapidly, swallowing everything in its path. Malik looked around. Firefighters hadn't arrived yet. The guests, dressed in expensive gowns and suits, stood frozen in the driveway, watching helplessly as the fire consumed the home. Some held their phones up, recording the disaster instead of acting. No one moved to go inside. No one screamed Emily's name. Malik had every reason to walk away. No one would expect him to go inside. No one would blame him if he left. He could have turned and disappeared into the night, just another shadow in the city. He could have kept walking, searching for a warm place to sleep. But his feet moved before he could think. He ran straight toward the flames. Should the party guests have done more? What would you have done? Malik kicked open the back door, coughing as thick smoke filled his lungs. The overwhelming heat wrapped around him like a suffocating blanket, and flames roared up the grand staircase ahead. "Emily, where are you?" he shouted, his voice barely cutting through the crackling fire. A weak cry came from above. "Help! I can't get out!" His heart pounded as he sprinted up the staircase, dodging burning debris that rained from the ceiling. The fire spread quickly, devouring everything in its path. The once pristine carpets curled under the heat, the chandeliers above crashing to the floor with violent shatters. He found Emily in her bedroom, trapped beneath a fallen bookshelf. Tears streaked her soot-covered face, her body trembling as she struggled to move. "Take my hand," Malik said, gripping the heavy shelf and pulling with all his strength. Emily hesitated, staring at him through the smoke. "You're dirty." Malik rolled his eyes, coughing. "And you're about to be crispy. Move!" Summoning every ounce of strength he had, he yanked her free and threw her over his shoulder. The moment he stepped away, the floor beneath them groaned, cracks spreading like spiderwebs across the wooden surface. The heat intensified, and the ceiling above them rumbled. The mansion was seconds away from collapsing. Malik tightened his grip on Emily and ran. As he bolted through the burning hallway, embers fell from the ceiling, scorching his skin. The walls groaned, threatening to cave in. Smoke filled his lungs and his legs burned with exhaustion, but he refused to stop. Emily clung to him, her arms wrapped around his neck. Her breath was shallow, and he could hear her sobbing against his shoulder. "Are we going to make it?" she whimpered. "We don't have a choice." Malik shot back, pushing forward. A massive beam collapsed behind them, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The force nearly sent Malik tumbling forward, but he kept moving. He knew if he stopped for even a second, they'd both be buried alive. The staircase loomed ahead, but the fire had already reached it. The flames danced dangerously across the railing, licking at the last path to safety. Malik hesitated for only a fraction of a second before making his choice. Gritting his teeth, he took the first step down. The wood beneath him creaked ominously, splintering under the heat. He felt the steps shifting under his weight, ready to give way at any moment. Halfway down, the railing snapped, sending burning embers flying through the air. Malik shielded Emily as best as he could, pushing himself to move faster. 3 steps left. 2. 1. With one final leap, he lunged toward the exit, crashing through the doorway, just as the entire staircase collapsed behind him. The mansion groaned one last time before the roof caved in with a deafening roar. Flames exploded outward, sending a wave of heat through the air. Malik stumbled forward, coughing violently. His legs shook beneath him, and his arms ached from carrying Emily, but he didn't let go. They had made it. For the first time that night, Malik allowed himself to breathe. What does this moment teach us about bravery? Would you have saved Emily? Malik carried Emily down the burning staircase, his arms aching from the weight. Flames licked at the walls, consuming everything in their path. The heat was unbearable, sweat dripping down his face, mixing with soot and ash. "Hold your breath," he shouted, sprinting through the thick smoke that curled around them like a living beast. Each step was a battle, the air filled with the deafening crackling of wood and the groans of a house on the brink of destruction. Embers rained down from above, scorching his skin, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The floor beneath them trembled, threatening to give way. The fire roared louder, the flames stretching greedily toward them. Malik gritted his teeth and pushed forward, Emily's small arms tightening around his neck as she sobbed into his shoulder. The grand front door loomed ahead, barely visible through the smoke. Malik could hear the muffled sounds of sirens in the distance, but they were too far away. The house wouldn't wait. Just as the ceiling above them gave a final groan, Malik reached the front door. He braced himself and kicked it open with everything he had left. They tumbled onto the manicured lawn, coughing and gasping for air. Fresh oxygen filled Malik's lungs, but the relief was short-lived. Behind them, the mansion let out a final, thunderous roar as the structure gave way. Flames erupted higher into the night sky, sending debris flying. A fiery explosion lit up the entire neighborhood. The crowd that had gathered outside stood in shock, their expensive gowns and tailored suits now covered in ash and soot. Some had their phones raised, filming the destruction, while others whispered among themselves, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Emily clung to him, shaking. Her small fingers dug into his arm as she sobbed into his chest. You saved me." Malik barely had time to process her words before a furious voice cut through the night. "Get away from her!" He turned to see Victor Langston standing among the stunned crowd, his face twisted with rage, his eyes locked on Malik. Malik barely had the strength to stand, his legs trembling beneath him. His lungs still burned from the smoke, and every muscle in his body ached. Yet even now, he could feel the weight of Langston's anger pressing down on him. Emily's grip on Malik tightened. "Daddy, no! He saved me!" But Langston's gaze didn't soften. His hands curled into fists at his sides, his body rigid with fury. The boy, who had just risked everything to save his daughter, now faced a different kind of fire, one fueled by hatred and prejudice. The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights flashing against the night sky. Malik took a slow breath, knowing that his fight wasn't over yet. Why do you think Victor was angry instead of grateful? Victor Langston pushed through the crowd, his heart pounding as he spotted Emily. He rushed toward her, grabbing her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" Emily, still trembling, shook her head. "No, Daddy, I'm okay. He saved me." Victor barely glanced at Malik before pulling Emily into his arms. "Thank God," he muttered, holding her tightly. Then, finally, he turned to the boy who had risked everything. "Who are you? Why were you in my house?" Malik, still breathless, met Victor's glare. "I pulled your daughter out of the fire." Victor scoffed, his lip curling. "A homeless thief saving my daughter? Do you expect me to believe that?" Emily tugged on his sleeve. "It's true. He saved me. I would have died." But Victor didn't listen. His mind was already made up. The crowd murmured. Reporters had arrived, cameras flashing, microphones raised. The destruction of the Langston estate was breaking news, but now something else had caught their attention. A journalist stepped forward. "Mr. Langston, is it true this boy saved your daughter's life?" Victor hesitated. The cameras zoomed in. The whole world was watching. He had a choice: acknowledge Malik's heroism or let his prejudice define him. The silence stretched, thick with tension. The crowd, the reporters, even Emily, all waited for Victor's response. The fire still smoldered behind them, the once grand mansion now a pile of ash and debris. The only thing left standing was the truth. Victor's jaw tightened as he looked down at Malik, his expression unreadable. "You expect me to believe that you, a street kid, ran into a burning building and saved my daughter?" Malik wiped the soot from his face, his chest still rising and falling heavily. "Believe whatever you want. It doesn't change what happened." Emily pulled away from her father's grip, stepping closer to Malik. "Daddy, I was trapped. The fire was everywhere. He didn't have to help me, but he did. I would have died if he hadn't been there." Victor's face darkened, his fists clenching. He turned back to the cameras, knowing the world was waiting for his answer. The story was no longer just about the fire. It was about him, about the kind of man he was. The journalists edged closer. "Mr. Langston, did this boy save your daughter?" Victor opened his mouth, but the words didn't come easily. He glanced around, realizing there was no way out of this. No way to deny what had happened, but acknowledging it. Admitting that someone like Malik had saved his child? That was something else entirely. His hesitation spoke louder than any words he could have said. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Just say it, Dad. Say he saved me." Victor exhaled sharply. The flashing lights of the cameras felt blinding, the weight of judgment pressing down on him. Finally, through gritted teeth, he muttered, "Fine." He saved her. The crowd erupted, some in applause, others in murmurs of disbelief at his reluctance. The reporters scribbled furiously, capturing the moment that would soon spread across headlines everywhere. But Malik? He didn't need Victor's approval. He had already done the right thing, and that was enough. What would you have done in Victor's position? Days later, Victor Langston stood before the media, cameras flashing in front of him. The fire had destroyed his estate, but the real story had become something much bigger. He took a deep breath, gripping the edges of the podium as he prepared to speak. "I misjudged someone who saved my daughter's life," he admitted, his voice steady yet uneasy. The reporters leaned in, waiting for more. "In a moment of crisis, I let my prejudices blind me. And I was wrong." He turned slightly to his right, where Malik stood, his hands shoved into the pockets of an oversized jacket. The boy shifted uncomfortably, glancing around at the sea of faces watching him. Victor stepped forward and extended an envelope. "You're a hero, and heroes deserve more than just a thank you." Malik hesitated before reaching out and taking it. Inside was a scholarship, a place to live, and a fresh start. His fingers trembled as he read over the details, disbelief written across his face. "For real?" Malik asked, his voice quieter than usual. "For real," Victor replied, "if you'll accept it." Malik looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. He had spent years surviving, knowing that nothing ever came easy, that people like Victor Langston didn't just hand out second chances. Emily, standing beside her father, nudged him lightly. "Take it, Malik. You deserve it." He let out a small, almost disbelieving chuckle. "Guess it beats sleeping in the alley." Victor gave a stiff nod, his face unreadable, but Emily smiled brightly. The reporters snapped pictures, capturing the moment that would soon be shared everywhere. Sometimes, change starts with a single act of courage. Malik stared down at the envelope again, his heartbeat echoing in his ears. The words on the paper felt surreal, as if they belonged to someone else. A scholarship? A home? For the first time in his life, there was something in front of him that wasn't just about surviving another day. A journalist stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Malik, how does it feel to go from living on the streets to being recognized as a hero?" Malik exhaled, glancing at the cameras. "I don't know. I didn't do it for this. I just couldn't let her die." Victor studied him for a long moment before clearing his throat. "It takes a lot to risk your life for someone you don't know," he admitted. "Especially someone who had everything you didn't." Malik shrugged. Didn't matter. She needed help. Emily smiled at him. "And you were there." The reporters kept snapping photos, capturing the moment, but Malik barely noticed. His fingers still clutched the envelope tightly, his mind racing. Could he really take this offer? Could he trust it? "So," Victor asked, crossing his arms, "are you going to accept it or not?" Malik hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah," he said finally, "I'll take it." The reporters erupted into more questions, but Malik was barely listening now. A fresh start, a new life, a future. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he had something to look forward to. Days later, Malik stepped into his new home, his heart pounding in his chest. For the first time in his life, he had a place of his own bed, his own room, his own future. The walls were painted a soft blue, the bed neatly made with fresh sheets. A small desk sat in the corner with a notebook and a pen placed on top. The sight of it all made Malik pause. He had spent years sleeping on cold pavement, with nothing but a thin blanket to shield him from the night. Now he had warmth, security, something he had never dared to dream about. Emily stood in the doorway, watching him take it all in. "Guess that means we're friends now?" she asked with a smirk. Malik glanced at her and smirked back. "We'll see." He walked over to the bed and ran a hand over the soft fabric. It felt unreal. He sat down slowly, as if testing to make sure it wouldn't disappear beneath him. The mattress was firm, but comfortable. He had never owned anything like it before. Word of his rescue had spread everywhere. His story went viral, inspiring people across the country to rethink their assumptions about kids like him. People no longer saw him as just another homeless boy. They saw him for what he was, a hero. Even Victor Langston changed. The once proud billionaire, who had dismissed Malik at first, now saw him differently. He started funding shelters and programs for homeless kids, using his influence to help others in situations like Malik's. "One act of kindness," he told reporters, "can change everything." Malik didn't care much for the media attention. What mattered was the life in front of him, the chance to go to school, to have a safe place to sleep, to dream about the future. He walked to the window, staring out at the world beyond. The streets where he once fought to survive looked different from this side. They didn't seem so cold, so unforgiving. It was strange how quickly things had changed. Emily plopped down on the chair by his desk, crossing her arms. "So, what now?" she asked. Malik exhaled. "I don't know. School, I guess, figuring out what comes next." She nodded. "You ever think about what you want to be?" He thought about it for a moment. "I never had time to think about that before. But now, maybe something that helps other kids like me." Emily smiled. "I think you'd be good at that." He had fought for survival his whole life. Now, for the first time, he was living. As he looked around his new room, he realized something important. He hadn't just changed his own life. He had changed theirs too. What lessons can we learn from Malik's journey? How can we apply them to our own lives?